Hello creatures, my name's Chloe. Today I'm bringing you my mid-year book freakout tag. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. So the first question on the tag is, what's the best book you've read in 2020? Without a doubt, it has to be The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is a grimdark war Asian fantasy. Essentially, the main character, Rin, is a war foundling who has grown up in less than ideal circumstances, and her only chance for escape is to score very, very good marks on sort of the national standardised test and get into a university, which essentially she does. And then it follows her as she goes through her learning. She gets into a military academy, which is where some of the war elements start to come in, and she starts to learn about her heritage and what she can do with her learning, essentially. And there's a lot of magical elements. Very, very dark, like all the trigger warnings I can possibly think of. There's a lot. I could not get this book out of my head once I'd started it. There were just lines that would play over and over again for days. It didn't disappear. A lot of books I can just sort of go, oh, I'm done, and then move on to my next book. I couldn't do that with this. I had to have a break because it was so heavy. It's also why I haven't read the second book yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. The second question is, what's the best sequel you've read in 2020? Without a doubt for me, that is Lie Sleeping by Ben Aaronovitch. I just read this. It's my most recent read and probably my last read of June, because I don't think I'm going to be able to get through anything else anytime soon. So if you don't know, the Rivers of London series is based around Peter Grant. He's a young police officer in London and he accidentally stumbles across magic in the first book. As it goes through, you sort of explore him learning magic and learning about magical policing and all the different things that people don't really know exist in London and even England as a whole. This is the 7th book. Each book is basically a sort of self-contained mystery that's connected to the previous one somehow. There's also novellas, little tiny short snippets that he posts on his website, and graphic novels. All of them connect, but you don't have to read the graphic novels to make sense of these, though it does help. It's things like you'll understand a reference to sentient mould. Like, I haven't read that graphic novel yet, but I know it's going to make sense once I have read it. Things like that. This is the 7th book, and this is where we really get to see what the main plot has actually been about all this time, which obviously great. And I don't know, I think it was just the tightest story that Ben Aaronovitch has told. Like, I loved all the others, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I get a little bit discombobulated when there's plot heavy elements, particularly in crime. It just doesn't sink into my head the same way. But this got me from the start to the end. I cannot wait to read the next book. Really excited. So the next prompt is, what's a new release you haven't read yet but want to? I have two for this one. So the first one is Sugar Summer by Hannah Moscowitz. This is a FF retelling of Dirty Dancing. Really love Dirty Dancing. It's one of my favourite rom-coms. I love the energy of it, and from what I can tell, the book is going to capture that energy. And I think it'll be really fun to see it in an FF retelling from now, especially because obviously Dirty Dancing came out in 1987. Very, very different to how someone would maybe write that story now. I'm really looking forward to it. Plus, stunning, stunning cover. I love it so much. I don't know if it's the colours or the energy of it, but it's absolutely gorgeous. I can't wait to read this book. Other one is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I don't know heaps about this book, I must admit. I've wanted to read N.K. Jemisin's The Broken Earth series for ages, and I didn't get around to it before the libraries closed, so I haven't been able to get a copy. But I saw a couple of different people talking about this book and not being able to put it down, and someone, I can't remember who it was now, described it in their, I think, May wrap-up, and it's got one of my favourite, plot features of all time, which is sentient cities. As far as I can tell in this one, the 5 boroughs in New York are all sentient beings. I don't know how they play in the plot. I don't know what the plot is. I don't know who the main character is. I'm pretty sure the boroughs are villains, but I'm not 100% certain on that. I have no idea. I love this trope so much that I do not care. I haven't come across it very often, but I just love it as a concept. I think it's really cool. And I've wanted to read this author anyway, so definitely something I want to read. So what are your most anticipated releases for the second half of 2020? Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Metal. This is the second book in the Gideon the Ninth series, which is FF space necromancers. That's the best way I can explain the plot. I know a lot of people have said this is an FF, but I read the first book a couple of months ago and loved it. And I would definitely say it's FF. It's just not overt the way some people might have expected by it being called FF. Really, really loved the first book. I'm very excited for the second one because I immediately, as soon as I finished the first one, I closed it and then checked when the next one was coming out, and I had months to wait and I was really, really sad about it. The second book is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. I've heard heaps about this book. Essentially, a young girl makes a deal with the devil where she will live forever, but no one will remember her. I've heard V. Schwab talk a lot about this book on her social media and in interviews. It's taken her 8 years to write it. I also really enjoy V. Schwab's work, but I also kind of want to see the culmination of all the things she's talked about and what it took to build it, kind of. I'm very interested in this book because I know it's so personal to the author, and I don't really have the connection to a lot of authors the way I do with V. Schwab because I follow her online, but yeah, I'm really excited about that one. What were your biggest disappointments of 2020? Unfortunately, I didn't have to think too hard about this because I've had a really great year with books, but I've also been very badly let down by a couple. So the first one, The House with the Clock in Its Walls by John Bellairs. I read this because I thought the movie trailer looked really good. I haven't watched it, and I'm not going to, based on this book. I'm not going to explain what the book is because I can barely remember. It's a kid has to go and live with his uncle, and there's a clock in the walls of the house, and it's a mystery. It's not much of a mystery in the book. It was so anticlimactic, it barely made sense, so fat-phobic, really flat female characters. I didn't enjoy the writing. I hated this book, to be honest. I kept reading it because I wanted to know what happened, but when I found out what it was just a massive letdown. This is one of those rare instances where I do think the movie would have to be better because I don't understand how it could possibly be worse. The second one that disappointed me wasn't so much that I hated it, like The House with the Clock in Its Walls, though I had expected that to be better, but this one, the series started off really, really strong and then dropped off, and that is Tongues of Serpents by Naomi Novik, which is the sixth book in her Temeraire series. There's 9 books overall. I loved the first book. I loved it so much. These are alternate history books of the Napoleonic Wars, but what if they were fought with dragons? The series started off really strong and it started to drop off a little bit because it got into heavier war elements, which I'm not normally as into anyway, but it stood really strong for the first couple of books. And I can't really say why I didn't like the previous book in the series, but this one particularly annoyed me kind of because I wanted to love it so badly. So I'm not going to tell you how, but basically each book is set in a different country, and in this book the main character and his dragon Temeraire end up in Australia. And this is obviously it's the Napoleonic Wars, so very early 19th century. This is when Australia was still a penal colony. The entire book is spent trekking across the middle of Australia, which, for those of you who don't know, is a massive desert. There's not much in it, which I understand, but this whole book was just them trekking through dirt looking for water. There wasn't any, greatly exciting bits. They were trying to follow a gang or something. I read this a while ago, I've pretty much blocked a lot of it out, but I felt it could have been a lot more exciting than it was, and there's not that many fantasy stories set in Australia in that era particularly. It's not a common thing to come across, and I was really hoping it would be awesome, and it just wasn't. So the next question is, what was your biggest surprise of 2020? Okay. Again, I have 2, but they're by the same author and they're in the same series, and I'm going to explain why. So it was The Jukes Tat by Miranda Davis. This is a self-published historical romance. A couple of friends and I read it for a laugh, and then we were shocked because we enjoyed it. The premise of the first book is a young woman is basically disgraced by a duke and gets sent away by her brother. That duke dies, his younger brother takes over, and she's talked a lot to her servants about, oh god, I'd love to get revenge on him. They see him in London one night while she and them are visiting, so they kidnap him and execute her plan to tattoo something embarrassing on his genitalia. And then romance afterwards. So it's enemies to lovers, obviously. And, like, barring a couple of, like, problematic lines that I really just think they came off like they'd been missed in an edit run, and I, like, would be very easy to fix them, but they are there. All three of us really enjoyed it, and then I went on to read the second book, The Baron's Betrothal, and I loved that book. I don't know what, I just loved it. It was so good. There wasn't any of the problematic content that was in the first book. That concept is a young woman her father has basically tried to arrange her marriage. So she runs away to a cottage, which is on the land of the Baron who she's engaged to, who she thinks is like this disgusting old man who just wants to marry, I think she's 19. What she doesn't realise is the young man who she runs into on the property, very, very handsome and youthful, is the Baron. So one of the early scenes is her just mouthing off about the Baron to him, and he goes along with it. It's really, really fun. I really enjoyed it, and I was so surprised that I loved these so much. I don't read a ton of historical romance, I don't read a ton of self-published books, and I loved them. So the next question is, who is your favourite new author? I originally had Tamsin Metal for this question because I really, really loved her style, and she's definitely a new favourite. And mostly I've read authors who I've already come across before, but then I realised I was forgetting an author in particular who, having bought the first book at the very start of January, I've inhaled everything she's written in this particular world. I think I've got like 5 of her books left that are set like a paranormal series. That's all I haven't read. The rest I binged through, and that is Gail Carriger. She writes historical fantasies that are also comedy of manners books. This is the first book in the Parasol Protectorate, which is 5 books. Then she's got a sequel series that's 4. She has 3 novellas set across those 2 worlds, and then there's 2 more that go with the Etiquette and Espionage series, which is set before these, and that's also 4 books. I read all those, every single one. Could not get enough of them. Really, really love this. A friend of mine got me onto them. Without a doubt, she's definitely my favourite new author, and I'm looking forward to seeing where she goes now, because I kind of got into it just as she finished up with all the main series. Like, they're all done now. So I don't know what she's going to do next, but I really want to read her other books as well. I like her modern stuff, and she's got a little bit of sci-fi that I'm interested in as well. The next question is, who is your newest fictional crush? I don't really have one, to be honest. I don't get fictional crushes much anymore. I definitely feel like that's something that was a bigger thing when I was in high school. But if I had to pick anybody, it would be William from 13th Child, because he's a magical academic who he's very proper, and he's a little bit of a know-it-all, but he's also very quiet and super supportive of the main character in that book, which is by Patricia C. Wrede, by the way, because I forgot to say that. They're frontier fantasy books. I really, really like him. He's probably the closest thing to it. Who is your newest favourite character? Again, like, I've got a big range that I can choose from. There's a lot of characters in the Solace books that I really like, but I'm going to go with the one who sort of sprang to mind immediately, and that's because I read the book more recently. So I went with Finian de Karen de Seal from Aurora Burning. He's a Betrascan who has muscular issues. He's really sassy. He's really funny. I'm pretty sure pansexual. Like, he's on page definitely at least bisexual, but I'm thinking more like pan, omnisexual type area. Really, really fun character, but not without his own vulnerabilities, which I really enjoy. His relationship to his body and his disability are really well explored in Aurora Burning, which I really appreciated, and how he handles that is, I think, very respectful, and how his teammates handle it is really respectful. But his character is just nuanced and lovely, but also fun, a bit sarcastic, and I just really love him. What is a book that made you cry? No books have made me cry this year. I don't really cry at books. It doesn't tend to happen. It used to, but none that I've read this year. What is a book that made you happy? So this has to be Well Met by Jen DeLuca. It's a Ren Fair romance. A young woman moves to a small town to help take care of her sister when her sister and her daughter are in a car accident. The sister has a broken leg, so she can't move around very much, and the daughter wants to sign up for the Renaissance Fair, but she needs a parent or guardian to do it with her, so her auntie joins up. The person who's organising the Ren Fair is a tall, dark, brooding, absolute type A jerk. Like, he's buttoned up, he's an English teacher, but he's quite rude to the main character and just They spark off each other a lot, but when they're actually performing at the Ren Fair, their characters really get along and start to have a little bit of a pseudo-romance happening as part of the performance. At some stage, the performance starts to seep into real life. Made me really happy. I loved it. It was so different to a lot of the romances I've read before. They've got little moments between the two characters where they're just joking about Shakespeare or discussing it and bouncing off each other a lot, which I thought was really fun. I don't know, it delighted me all the way through. Okay, second to last question. What is the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year? I got myself a couple of options for this because I couldn't decide, and then I realised they're all in my most recent unboxing video, which I'll link up above if you want to have a look at the three that I was thinking of. But in the end, I had to go with Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare because I can't get over the colours in the front of this. It's beautifully designed. It's not a special edition. It's not anything like that. It's just the base cover. And I love it. Like, I was toying with the idea of getting one of the, like, super beautiful hardcover special editions of Chain of Gold, but I honestly like this cover the most. I think it's stunning. It's just beautiful. I loved it. So, yeah, I definitely have to go with that. Okay, and the very last question. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? I'm just going to run these off from memory because I'm not hunting through my 500 book strong TBR to check. Queen of Her in Darkness by Cassandra Clare, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, Hagseed by Margaret Atwood, American Gods by Neil Gaiman. Let me see, what are my others? The Broken Earth by N.K. Jemisin, that's a really big one. What else have we got? There's more than that. I know there's more than that. I really want to read the first Witcher book, but I've got to steal that from my boyfriend because I bought him the book, but not myself. Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. I've had that for a couple of years and I just keep not picking it up, which is silly. The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, Winterwood by Shay Earnshaw, the rest of the Spellslinger series by Sebastian de Castell. I've got a lot. Ninth House. I have tons. I've got a lot of reading to do. I'm also trying to read 170 books by the end of the year because at the moment I'm sitting on 130 something, so I kind of need to get myself in gear if I want to actually hit my reading goal for this year. I've got a lot to do. So that is my mid-year book freakout tag for 2020. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think of some of the books I've mentioned. If you have any opinions, please let me know. If there's any books you think I'd like, I'm always up for a recommendation. All my social media links are down in the description box below. Subscribe if you want to, like it if you did, and I will see you soon in my next video.